Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the NXL AI Revenue Podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Takeshi Aida, who is the founder and CEO of RevComm. RevComm are a Tokyo-based AI voice intelligence company behind MiiTel, a platform that records, transcribes, and analyzes business conversations in real time. Aida-san, it is a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, pleased to meet you again, and thanks for having me.
Yeah. I always like to give a little bit of context before to the audience of how we met. So you and I met in Tokyo
Yep.
probably a year and a half ago now, and at the time you were at a pitch event and you were presenting RevComm to an audience, and I happened to know a lot about your competitor in the
Yes.
US. So I started asking you a few questions, and then you came up to me at the end of the event, and we started to work together and we collaborated. So it's always nice to.
Thanks to you. Yeah.
So it's always nice to look back. Okay, so let's get straight into it. I'm excited for our audience to hear more about kind of what you've built. In terms of RevComm, some tremendous success. I think you've got over 3,000 customers now across Japan and internationally. You were named as part of the top 50 AI companies and one of the only Asian companies to be named in that list. So incredible work. But before all of that, in terms of your background, I would love to hear for people to hear a bit about your background, because you started off at one of the biggest Japanese companies, Mitsubishi Corporation.
Yeah.
And you worked across M&A, government deals. What did that actually teach you about kind of business and the world of sales, and how did you get here today? Would love to hear a bit more about that.
So at Mitsubishi Corp, I was responsible for the automotive business across the Middle East, Ukraine, Turkey, and the Caucasus region. Some of my responsibilities included trading, establishing joint ventures, M&A, and managing operation of those companies. So through that experience, the biggest issue I struggled with was the sales productivity. So I tried many things. I conducted the sales training and the one-on-ones. I did shadowing, where managers listen to the sales calls from behind the scene. I also did the side-by-side observation, where managers stood next to the sales rep to observe how they worked. I joined a customer meeting, created playbooks, and tried to standardize the best practices. But in the end, the result did not fundamentally change. It ended up with something like 20-60-20 distribution. The top performers generate most of the results. The middle group, remained the average, and the bottom performers continue to struggle. No matter how much training I provided, the organization as a whole did not improve as much as I wanted. So when I thought deeply about why, I realized there was a very fundamental problem. I actually did not know what was happening between the customer and the sales rep. So what exactly did the customer say? How did the salesperson respond? What objection appeared? What tone, sentiment, or nuance changed the conversations? All of that was black box, right? So it sounds obvious now, but at that time, it was so obvious that almost nobody treated it as a serious management problem. But this was the hidden truth. If we cannot analyze the actual conversation, we cannot truly improve the sales productivity. That insight became the foundation of RevComm. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So you in a traditional sense, you identified a serious problem within the organizations that you were in and the different experiences you were having, and that problem was very much sales productivity. And then you thought about really a solution of how to solve it, which is amazing. So actually, just before we go into kind of the world of sales, I would love to get your perspective, because we got a lot of CROs, CMOs who listen to this podcast, and many of them will be in kind of similar situations, in that they work for a very big organization, or they're even a mid-sized organization, and they're thinking about a problem. And they want to take that leap to becoming a founder. I know it was a while, maybe 7 or 8 years ago for you now, but what I guess made you go from that very comfortable life of kind of being an executive, doing well, to then going on and starting a business? Like, any sort of advice you can give on that?
Yeah. So when I was deciding what kind of company to build, I looked at the opportunity through two lenses, right? The
Mm,
first lens was what fundamental technology will become important over the next 5 or 10 years. The
mm,
second lens was what pain do I personally feel in business every day? For the first lens, I had a strong conviction that AI will become one of the most important technologies over the next decade. So around 2017, when the attention is all you need paper was published, I felt that natural language AI was going to advance dramatically over the next several years. For the
mm,
second lens, the pain I felt that um, I felt was high cost of communication in business. In
mm,
many organizations, what matters is not always what was said,
mm,
but who said it, right? The same idea can be ignored when a junior person says it and accepted when senior person says it. So
mm,
important knowledge is hidden inside a conversation, relationships, hierarchy, and a context that creates enormous communication cost. So when I studied AI more deeply, I realized that AI could potentially reduce the communication cost by making conversation visible, objective, and analyzable. So
yeah.
broadly speaking, corporate data consists of three major categories, which is text, image, and voice.
Mm,
Text, images, the touch point is email, chat, office thought. It's already stored as big data. But if you look at the voice, which touchpoint is phone, web meeting, face to face, it's a flow of communication. It's disappeared every time.
mm,
It's
mm.
what as big data. So I thought this is going to be a super chance. So I bet, voice AI. So that's why hey, this is a thing that I should bet on, and I decided to quit Mitsubishi.
That's a good. First thing is like problem. You've identified a problem. You found a trend, a potential opportunity, and you basically decided to take a bet, which I think is very inspiring for many to hear. You talked a bit about AI and just kind of. I guess you went into this before generative AI became what it is today and mainstream. So you started RevComm in kind of 2017, 2018
Yeah.
time.
Yep.
And now we're in the world where AI has just maximized in terms of its capability. How has this kind of shift impacted your business? How have you had to adapt and change, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So at that time, back in 2018, generative AI was not mainstream yet, as you mentioned, but several conditions were already changing. First, cloud telephony, the cloud software adoption were accelerating.
Mm,
Not only in the US or UK, but also in Japan and SEA. And second, speech recognition was becoming good enough for business use, especially
mm,
if we focus deeply on specific use cases like, inside sales.
mm,
The, you know, the quality was improving a lot, right? And
yeah.
third, Japan was facing, structural labor shortage. Companies could no longer rely only on hiring more people. They needed to improve productivity and transfer knowledge faster. So I
Mm,
believe voice would become a next major, business data source. At that time, many people understood email analytics or web analytics, but voice conversation was still offline and invisible. I wanted to digitize that world. The hardest part in early days was not only the technology, it was also market education. Right?
mm,
Customer did not yet have a category in their mind of conversation intelligence, right? So we had to explain why recording, transcribing, analyzing, and coaching conversation could directly improve revenue, productivity, and the customer experience. So typically, Japanese language recognition, security, enterprise requirement, and real-time usability were also difficult. But the
mm.
bigger challenge was creating a new category, and current OLM is accelerating every people to utilize the AI and leverage the AI. So I see a strong forward of this market trend.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it was the Microsoft CEO who came out and said, something very controversial, which was the traditional SaaS as we know it is dead. And
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of noise out there around like people going and building their own tech but what do you say to that? Because I know that there's a lot that goes into building a technology even today, right? But
yeah,
I'm keen to hear your perspective on that.
yeah. What here obvious is obviously right. So no matter, it's not matter of AI or LLM. Back in the day, you realize that no matter what,
Hmm.
application is going to be commoditized,
Hmm.
right? So it's all about moat. How are you going to build your moat, right? So back in the day, before LLM is getting better and better and better, um, if you look at the competition, you're going to look at the same layer. For example, if you divide in technology into four layer, it's easy to understand, which is EAS, like AWS, GCP, Azure, OCI. On top of that, data layer, Box, Dropbox, Snowflake. Top of that, algorithm layer like Anthropic, OpenAI, Perplexity, Gemini, and top of that, application, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
before LLM came, you need to focus on application layer, who's the competitor. But after LLM came with vibe coding tool like Cloud, Codex, these kind of thing, end user can build their application by themselves. So that's the frenemy condition is gonna accelerate the competition very hard. So that's the point. But intrinsic moat is not a matter. Even LLM came. How are you gonna, entice or strengthen your moat is a point.
yeah,
So in my opinion, we are not providing a software. We are not providing an application. Rather, positioning is a data. So over the dead body, each company's data is not going to be commoditized
yeah,
because of regulation and data residency and the source of competition, right? So
yeah,
in these three reasons, the data, each company's data will not be open source. So
yes.
what I'm thinking is that how you're going to treat and how you're going to store the original data is going to be the next mode.
Oh, that's super interesting. Okay, so data residency and so you're kind of positioning yourself in and around a company's data because that's where you see a company's data is never going to go anywhere. Ultimately, it's going to be very important to them always.
Yeah.
And who provides that data? In your case, in many ways, voice and email. You're tracking everything. So that's an interesting way to look at it and differentiate
And,
yourself.
well, one thing I'd like to add is that there's two kinds of data, which is KGI like data and a KPI like data. And text is a KGI,
Hmm.
voice is like a KPI. The thing is, text data is often lagging the indicator. It captures a conclusion. What was written after the fact? What was reported? What was entered into the CRM? But the voice data is much closer to leading indicator. It
Mm,
captures a actual process, what kind of what the customer said, and what the salesperson has asked, where the objection appeared, how trust was built, and why the outcome happened. These kind of KPI like data, and there's a KGI like data. And I think more like KPI like data is gonna be more important. So when you like to start a business, how are you gonna get the KPI like data and how you leverage it and automate the process?
got it. Makes total sense. Let's go into a little bit around your proposition, your product in the context of sales, because you've built initially anyway. The thought was around sales productivity and making salespeople better, more effective, more efficient.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear, and this is always a question I had, is how do you use your platform internally with your own sales function? What does the day to day look like at RevComm for your own sales function?
Yeah, so we use MiiTel very heavily internally. If I describe it simply, we use it as a self-coaching tool and
Mhm.
also as an AI assisted for each person. So every sales conversation is recorded, transcribed, and summarized and analyzed. Each sales rep can review their own conversation and understand what went well, what did not go well, and what they should improve next time. For
Mm.
example, they can check whether they asked the right discovery questions, whether they spoke too much, whether they captured the customer's real pain, whether they handled the objection properly, and whether they agree on clear next steps. So the
Yeah.
main value is not just management control; it is a self-improvement. More recently, MiiTel also supports our sales rep in real time, so it can remind them the point of they may have missed, support follow-up actions, and help create documents or summarize after the conversation. So the
Mm.
image is almost like giving each sales reps 5 highly capable business assistants. They can focus more on custom conversation itself, while AI supports surrounding work like preparation, note taking, follow up, documentation, and coaching. So that's the how we leverage the MiiTel and increase the productivity.
Yeah. So what I find interesting is I've used your tool, and I'm definitely when I was in Japan, I was running a Salesforce over there, and it certainly benefited me. And I've used other kind of tools in
Nice.
in America and the UK, as you know.
Yeah.
Where it comes, and I've kind of run the implementation process with a sales team. What I always often find with you know what you provide is that the culture of the sales team has to be such that it's a coaching culture. It's a culture of I want to improve. I want to get better every single day. Those sorts of teams often get the most value from what you're able to provide. Is genuinely what I see. Having that kind of coaching culture that's set from the top all the way down from the CRO all the way down to the director of sales to the sales managers every single day wanting to self-improve. Do you find that when you come across organizations, I mean, firstly, am I right to say that those are your best customers? And the second question to that is, do you often find if you don't come across an organization that has that kind of culture, that best in class culture, you struggle to get the best results? Is that fair to say, or how do
Yeah,
you how do you look at that?
yeah, it's fair to say. The best, customer, the MiiTel customer is, respecting a self-coaching culture. If you look at the, elementary school, things that, teach by teacher and things learned from self activity, like reading a book or something. The latter is more enjoyable, and I think you memorize those things rather
Hmm.
than thing teacher taught, right? So I think the fundamental has not been changed. Every single people would like to be self-coached rather than coached by somebody, right?
Yeah,
So the customer with a lot of result is using MiiTel as a self-coaching tool. For example,
yeah,
one customer is setting a self-coaching time every single morning. Everybody listen to the good call and good sales activity, right? And you know in the weekday they do by themselves, and at the evening they review by themselves. So
got it.
every single day the copy the high performer and self coach, and it improve dramatically.
Yeah. That's yeah. So your solution becomes a core part of the organization's sales culture and DNA effectively.
Yeah.
which is great. I want to move on a little bit to kind of selling in Japan versus West, and what you can learn from the Japanese way of selling. I know you've worked across a few different cultures yourself, so
Mhm.
I think your insight here is definitely valuable. Firstly, like what would you say are the fundamental differences between, let's say, selling in Japan versus selling in, let's say, the West, or even, I know you spent some time in the Middle East as well.
So the biggest difference is decision-making process in the US or Middle East or UK or even SCA. I think a strong executive sponsor can sometimes drive a decision very quickly, right? But in
Mm,
Japan, especially in enterprise, the decision is often more consensus driven. So
yeah.
there may be a formal approval process, but before that, there is usually an informal alignment process. So
Hmm.
many stakeholders need to feel comfortable before the company moves. So another difference is communication style. In Japan,
Mm,
customers may not say no or directly yes, right? So they may say, "Hey, we will consider it," or "It is difficult at this time." But in
yeah.
Japan, may actually mean the deal is already dead unless you understand the nuances, right? So
Yes.
it's also plays a very a central role. Japanese customer care a lot about reliability, security, support quality, and whether
Hmm.
the vendor will be long-term partner. So they do not want buy a tool and be abundant, right? What
Yeah.
would surprise a Western sales leader is the sales cycle may look show from the outside, but if you manage the internal alignment process correctly, the relationship can become very durable. Japan can be still start, but very loyal once trust is built.
Yeah. Yeah, so the cost to acquire a customer and the investment you put in is far greater, but then actually the lifetime value of that customer is also far greater. So it ends up kind of balancing itself out. I guess, like, just moving on from that, but very related, is the salespeople that you have internally. As you said, the internal alignment is key, right? So you need people who have that ability to kind of build up champions and kind of move people along and really help to drive that internal alignment, meet multiple people, multiple things, and have that attention to detail. What do you look for when it comes to a kind of salesperson? So you scale the sales team. What should people be looking out for?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I look for curiosity, ownership, and resilience, and the ability to create opportunity rather than trust, just receive them from the
Yeah.
SDR. Um, so they are not just good uh, presenting, right? So they are good at discovering pain that, customer may not have clear articulated yet. So
Yeah.
opening new logo, the best reps do three things. First, they understand the customer's business deeply. Second, they identify the real business issue, not just a product fit. And third, they navigate the organization and create the internal champions.
Mhm.
So order takers often depend on product interest. Hunters create a business case. That is the difference. So when I hiring, I pay attention to how candidates think about the past deals. If they can explain why customer bought,
Mm.
who influenced the decision, what risk existed, and how they changed the customer's thinking, that is a strong signal.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, and very much fits into kind of the medic sales methodology, which I don't know if you guys use a sales methodology internally. But identifying that pain, building champions, managing the risks in your deals. Those I actually, because obviously you guys sold to me once upon a time. Even though your salesperson was speaking in Japanese and I didn't understand a word he was saying, I was genuinely very impressed with him.
Thank
because
you.
I understood that he had urgency, he had curiosity, he was asking questions even though it was translated. So it goes to show that you don't necessarily have to understand someone's language to know that they are, a good salesperson, right? They've got those
Yeah,
characteristics that apply to all cultures, in my opinion. But yeah, you mentioned some very interesting points around kind of curiosity, identifying the pain points, and especially pain points that customers don't even know exist, which I find quite interesting for the world that you're in. You're looking at, you're speaking to organizations, maybe some traditional organizations who have been doing things in a certain way, doing sales in a certain way for a very long period of time, and they don't even think that, okay, maybe we should record stuff to then be able to have that visibility. So how do you go about, in a sales process, educating the customer that this is really important, and they should be looking at this?
yeah, great. Sales coaching is a specific, evidence-based, and continuous. So many companies say they coach, but what they actually do is a pipeline inspection. They ask,
Mm,
"Will this, deal close?" That is a coaching. Coaching is helping the rep improve the quality of
mm,
their thinking and behavior. A
yeah,
good coach session should use real conversation data. What did the customer say? What did the rep ask? Where did the conversation change? What was
yeah,
missed? What should happen next? The cadence should be regular. Managers should review calls, select key moments, and discuss them with reps. Coaching coaching culture is under developed because the manager are busy, conversation are invisible, and feedback becomes subjective. So
mm,
without infrastructure, coaching depends on managers' memory or opinion. That does not scale. I personally think.
yeah, yeah. Totally agree. Totally agree. And listen, I think one of the points that I think our audience would really value to hear from you, because you've got this kind of rare experience of starting a business from very, very small, and then
Yeah.
growing it now to hundreds of employees. What does scaling a sales team look like from those early days of kind of like 4 to 5 reps versus when you get to kind of 30, 40, 50 and beyond? I mean, what, obviously from your own experience, but also working with all these enterprise customers that you work with as well. What is that? What's the key fundamental differences in terms of being able to scale a sales team?
Uh, obviously it's hiring part is super important. You need to see the candidate as much as possible to enlarge the candidate pool.
Hmm.
And standardize the interview process. Well, what kind of capability you cherish and what kind of culture you'd like to build. You have to articulate and let manager to interview same level with you is the most important thing. Otherwise, you cannot hire 50 reps. So you need to three managers at least to make it 50 sales team. So you
Yeah.
need to standardize the interview process. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah. So hiring and resources are very, very key. And you've already talked about how you would go about hiring to the right characteristics, and then the kind of management level and making sure you have very strong managers with a coaching culture are the real kind of fundamental differences.
And I'd like to add one thing. So
Yeah.
onboarding is important, but at the same time, one piece of advice from my, investor shareholder from the US is that, hey, Takeshi, onboarding is obviously important, but also offboarding is important. If the, rep, of course, this, if, 50 people works well, it's ideal, but in reality, one rep would not. And then how you offboard is the
Mm,
most important thing. Usually business leader communicate directly, but it's better to make HR to communicate. And you have to, set up the offboarding rule. Otherwise, company culture is going to be, you know, um, damaged, and it's hard to hire new people, new good people. So you need to set up the offboarding process. Do not communicate directly when you offboard. Let other people to, communicate
Yeah.
to affect your, company image.
Aida-san, thank you so much for your time. I think it's been super valuable to get your insight into kind of everything from starting your own business to sales methodologies. And I really look forward to continuing our conversation in Japan.